community of the forum. Participants from business, from governments, from civil society, social entrepreneurs, startups, the right mix which we need here to have really an action-oriented meeting. I want to welcome particularly Mayor de Blasio. Mayor, I think many issues which we discussed during this meeting are very close to your heart, and many of the actions which we will propose, you have already in some way implemented in your own city. A special greeting goes, of course, to all our chairs of this meeting and to our panelists, and I just want to particularly appreciate your presence, Prime Minister, here this morning. Now, what are we doing here? We are not a celebrity meeting. We are a do tank, a think tank. We see more as do tanks than a think tank. The thinking has already been done. Now we have to implement. And what we will do and discuss are over 100 different projects prepared by multi-stakeholder coalitions to advance the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is not a normal conference. I think every of the sessions has been prepared by work processes, by the engagement of many of you, and I want to thank you for that. If we look at the role of the World Economic Forum as a platform for public-private partnership, we want to advance in very concrete ways the SDGs and, of course, the implementation of the Paris Agreement. But that's not enough. I think the world is changing and transforming itself at a rapid speed. We are in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution. We see more and more a multipolar world. We need more cooperation also on a global level to shape the global architecture, which we need for a new context, a context which is completely different from what we have seen when we built the after-war institutions and processes. So the World Economic Forum will be committed to provide its platform on a very concrete, grassroots level basis, as we do here, but we will also create a platform to shape the global infrastructure for tomorrow. Now, again, Mayor, great pleasure to welcome here, and please give Mayor Bill de Blasio a big hand joining us this morning.
Thank you so much, Klaus. And Klaus, I want to thank you for so often convening people from around the world in common cause and for being such a global voice of conscience. Let's thank Klaus for all he has done. I want to thank all of you for being here. Everyone in this room has an opportunity to be a forceful agent of change in the days, the weeks, the months ahead. And I'm not saying the years on purpose, because this change that we need is so urgent, particularly when it comes to the topic of climate change, that we all have to think about all we can do and how quickly we can do it. And that's why this gathering is so important. I want to thank the wonderful panel that will speak in a moment and the leadership they provide. We are honored to have you all in our city and all the participants. And a particular thank you to a member of my administration, my Commissioner for International Affairs, who works so closely with the UN, which we're honored to host, Commissioner Penny Abiwardena. Thank you so much. The New York attitude, you've probably all seen it over the years, New Yorkers are not known for modesty. So I will say this with a typical viewpoint of a New Yorker, I can't think of a better place in the entire world for this meeting to be happening. We as a city have been focused on achieving sustainable development goals for many years, as Klaus indicated. We believe the best way to do that is to put those goals out publicly and hold our own feet to the fire. And I want to say to anyone in the room who has a constituency, who is an elected official or has a board to answer to or shareholders to answer to, it is not always comforting to put your goals out publicly because, of course, they're often hard to achieve and everyone's watching. But I can tell you it forces action. It forces an entire organizational mindset to take hold, that urgency becomes the norm. So we put our goals out, and in July, we became the first city on the planet to hold ourselves publicly accountable for reporting our progress to the United Nations. This is important because we're trying to set an example not only to our own people, but to cities around the world. We should declare these goals, we should own them, we should live up to them. I'm very happy to say that Helsinki has just joined us in this effort, and I'd like to ask all of you to urge the cities, the governments that in the cities you live in, to take on this challenge as well, to put the goals out publicly and live up to them. And in no vein is that more important than when it comes to climate change. We are proud of some of the actions we're taking, but there's no such thing as resting on our laurels when it comes to climate change. Every time we take an action, we have to ask ourselves, what is the immediate next thing we can do? Because there's no government on this earth, there's no company, there's no person who is, per se, doing enough to address climate change. That's not a hopeless statement. We know this is a battle that can be won, but we know it can only be won with intense urgency, and there isn't enough of that right now. So we always are asking ourselves, what's the next step? How can we be bolder? How can we be more audacious? Because we know there's no time to waste. There's literally no time to waste. And I will speak from the perspective of this city. We had our before and after moment in the history of this city, the worst natural disaster we ever experienced, October 29th, 2012, Hurricane Sandy. We lost 44 people to that storm, $19 billion in damage. Whole neighborhoods of our city literally flattened. I can tell you this with assurance, since that day there are very few climate deniers left in New York City because we lived it. And we see now what's happening around the world. I was just in San Francisco for the climate conference, the summit. It was such an encouraging, positive gathering, but at the same time, all over the state of California, there were wildfires that were unprecedented. All of this, what's happened in California, what's happened just now in the Carolinas, and the Philippines, and Hong Kong, all of it from the same root cause, and we can see it, and more people are being touched by it, and more people are ready for action as a result. That is particularly true when it comes to our young people, and I imagine everyone in this audience has had conversations with the younger people in your lives and your families where you work, and their urgency is remarkable because it's entirely personal for them. So we now need to think about how we upend our way of doing things that got us into this jam and by definition can't get us out. We have to do something different. We have to think in a different collective fashion. We have to think about our policies and our power to vote for change. We have to think about what we do in our personal lives, and we also have to think about how we invest our money. And this would seem to be the most obvious option, the most obvious potential, and yet we're only scratching the surface of what could be done. The problems we face may seem daunting, but we actually have more tools at our disposal than we realize. And I want to tell you how this city is trying to use our economic power in this crucial moment to address the climate crisis, because we believe we can make an impact, and we believe everyone in this room can make an impact, and quickly. In January, we became the first United States city to begin divesting our pension assets from fossil fuels investments. We don't believe there is a future for fossil fuel investments. We are taking $5 billion out of that broken and dying industry. Earlier this month, we took another important step. We joined forces with London, obviously one of the other preeminent financial capitals of the world. And we announced that we will form a coalition of cities around the world that will also divest their assets from fossil fuel. We want to unleash the power of the local level, the power of the grassroots, to forge ahead when nations falter. And we will keep acting even when nations fail, including our own. Now, just days ago, we made another important announcement, and this is the positive side of the coin. Divestment is necessary to wean us off the negative, but we have a tremendous opportunity on the positive side. And we looked around the world and we saw the number of institutional investors were committed to the notion of putting 1% of their investments into renewable energy and climate solutions. We looked at that and we said, we have to do more. Our planet requires it. We have to do more. So we made an announcement that we will invest from this point on 2% of all of our pension assets in climate solutions. And that means an immediate investment of $4 billion for renewables, for retrofitting, for the things that will save us. It's one step, and we're just one place. And we know that overall, estimates have indicated we'll need $1 trillion in investment each year to really rid ourselves of fossil fuels and have the kind of renewable energy sources we need. But we can get there if everyone acts. We have a saying here in New York City, and we're trying to live up to it. Put your money where your mouth is. We believe in these ideas. We need to back them up with action. So we are not just investing in hydro and solar and wind, we're investing in momentum for change. Every time one of us acts, it helps the other one to act next. Now, I want to give you a sense of the scale of this, because if it sounds at first like how could that possibly be enough, watch how these numbers grow very, very quickly. If the top 50 United States pension funds invested 2% of their assets in climate solutions, that would be enough to convert half the homes in the United States of America to solar power. Isn't that extraordinary? If every major United States pension fund invested 2% in climate solutions, that would be $200 billion. That would be a major step towards what we need globally. So I'm asking investors around the world, and all investors in this room, to join us in this effort and join us quickly. Pull your money out of the doomed fossil fuel industry. Commit 2% of your assets to climate solutions and help all of us to create a lasting groundwork for change. And I'll tell you something, you will not only be doing the right thing for the earth, you'll be doing the right thing as investors, you'll be doing the right thing for your retirees and all the people who depend on your investments. Because why on earth would we put our money into an industry that will likely end up leaving 2/3 of its assets in the ground? And we hope it will end up leaving 2/3 of its assets in the ground. Fossil fuel investments aren't just toxic for our planet, they're toxic for our portfolios as well. And we know that these investments in fossil fuels are toxic for people. We see it around the world. We know, and so many people in this room have devoted their life to uplifting people in need. We know it's the world's poorest who bear the brunt. Millions flooded from their homes, millions of refugees, millions afflicted by heat waves. The whole underlying value of focusing on sustainable development, it all comes home to the climate issue. And we all in this room know, too, there's a growing understanding and growing concern for what happens to everyday working people. And how can they lead good and decent lives while fossil fuel investments won't help them do that? You know, in our country today, and we saw it play out so deeply in the 2016 election, the sense of economic insecurity and fear that interrelates with this issue. Well, today in our country, in the coal mines of West Virginia and the shale fields of North Dakota, the oil refineries of Louisiana, folks feel trapped. Their jobs simply won't last, but they don't see an alternative. We all owe them something better in this country and all over the world, and we actually can provide it for them. It's not a matter of just retraining people for new jobs. It's about creating new jobs and creating a new economy. And those jobs, by definition, are not in the dying industries of the past. They're in these extraordinary, hopeful, grand possibilities of the industries of the future. Now, we can make this happen. I want to emphasize this. I know I'm preaching to the converted in some cases, but I know there's also a lot of people around the world who doubt whether we can achieve what we need to in the time we have. I'm convinced we can do it, but it will take relentless action. We will literally have to build a whole new economy so that people can, in their own homes, in their own towns, in their own backyards, if you will, they can have an economy that offers them both a paycheck and a planet they can live in. That's the mission for all of us. Let me conclude with one more thought, and with my deep appreciation to everyone in this room for all you do. And I know a lot of people here have been working on addressing climate change for not just years, but for decades. And I know you've come up against the climate deniers, and you've come up against the cynics many a time. You've come up against people who ignore the reality, even though we see storm after storm and disaster after disaster. And you've certainly met many people who are people of goodwill, but say, it's just too hard to fix. Well, the next time you encounter any of these people, please tell them that you were in New York City. Please tell them the biggest city in the United States of America is taking action, and we believe this action can make a huge difference. Tell them to join us as quickly and as forcefully as they can. You know, at the end of a speech, it's customary to quote a great mind, a great philosopher, a great historical figure. I will do that now and quote Frank Sinatra, who sang once actually of New York City, if you can make it there, you'll make it anywhere. I say, if we can make it happen in New York City, financial capital of the world, if we can make it here, you can make it happen where you live. You can put your money into the technologies that will save us all. You can help us break the vicious cycle we've been living in. We know how much carbon has been pumped into the air already. We know the path we're already on. We know we have to break it. And we know that every step and every action is needed. And I will conclude with this simple thought. We have to feel an energy every day, as so many of our younger citizens do. We have to feel an energy, an urgent energy. At least that is a reusable bottle.
There's a lot of energy.
That's very good, because if he had knocked over a plastic bottle, I would have had to lecture him right there. But as so many of our younger citizens feel, we need to get fossil fuels out of our lives once and for all. We have to do it fast, because fossil fuels, my friends, belong only one place, stranded in the ground. Let's make sure they stay there. Thank you. God bless you all.
Good morning. Welcome to the Sustainable Development Impact Summit. We're very much looking forward to this opening plenary, building sustainable markets. It's now 3 years ago we agreed on the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. They are universal. They cover everything from climate change to the goal of eradicating all extreme poverty by 2030. These are huge ambitions. What we are lacking still is a roadmap that matches these ambitions. Because we can't solve all this with status quo or just with some additional development assistance or some projects. We need systemic change, and this panel will address shift in corporate business models, a reorientated and mobilized financial system, not only looking at the cost of action, but also the cost of inaction. We will also have to look at an enabling environment that promotes SDG-aligned regulations and incentives. So the modus operandi of this summit is to incentivize this emerging action revolution. And we have a great panel to address this. We have, on my far left, we have Prime Minister of Denmark, Lars Løkke Rasmussen, that is very devoted to the SDGs and also shown a lot of leadership in this area. David McLennan, Chairman and CEO of Cargill, US. Cargill founded in 1865 and is the largest privately owned corporation in the US. Then we have Vinny Bianamia, Executive Director, Oxfam International. And then here we have Barbara Novick, Vice Chairman, BlackRock US. Barbara is one of the founders of BlackRock, and today BlackRock is the world's largest asset manager, 6.5 trillion or 7.5? 6.5 trillion US dollars invested all over the world. So I have one question that I want the panel to answer, so we can kick off this whole thing. And that starting question is, what is really needed to stimulate a significant shift towards a sustainable marketplace? Why don't we start with you, Barbara? You have the 6.5 trillion, so you have money talks, huh?
So I'm going to start a little non-traditionally, and I guess I would call it, as you phrased it, we are on the road, and we are on, I think, a very good path. So I'm going to talk about the glass being half full, not just half empty, and then what things we can do in addition. I think as you look back over the last several years, there's a serious effort at sustainability, whether it is companies thinking about their own business and providing better quality information to investors, or it is on the investor side as investors become more educated and selecting amongst products that are being offered. So I don't have time to list all the initiatives today, but things like the PRI, if you look back, April 2006, launched with 63 signatories and 6.5 trillion of assets. Today, 1,900 signatories representing over 80 trillion in assets. Huge progress. And it's just one of the many initiatives. I could go through an alphabet soup of them. If anything, one of the concerns that we have is that there are too many competing initiatives, which leads to multiple standards and what we call survey fatigue, and I'll come back to that, and how the public sector can help in rationalizing that. Second is, if you look back at corporate governance standards and stewardship standards globally, again, tremendous progress, starting with the G20 OECD standards. Today we count 17 stewardship codes literally around the world, from the UK to Japan to Australia to South Africa and more. There's also been a tremendous consortium of asset owners and asset managers coming out with principles for both corporate governance and investment stewardship. BlackRock takes this very seriously, starting, obviously, many of you have heard of what we call now Larry's letter, but Larry Fink, our chairman and CEO, sending a letter every year to other CEOs, the last one getting tremendous pickup and really resonating, I think, with many, many people around the world. In addition to that, we have a dedicated stewardship team. We engage with thousands of companies around the world and vote in their annual meetings. So a quick look on the product side also shows tremendous progress, and just to give you some numbers to put it in perspective, between 2015 and 2017, there were 100 new sustainable mutual funds just here in the US launched. In addition, quite a few in Europe and in Asia, and this is done to meet the needs of different kinds of clients. Just this last year alone, it's a 30% increase in the assets in these kinds of funds around the world. And this is true not just in equities, but in bonds, in alternatives, in all different products. We continue to see this demand coming from different kinds of clients, traditional pension plans, defined contribution plans, individual investors, and that's a critical element. People don't give enough weight to the preferences of the clients is critical to whether or not more assets will be allocated in this sector. And the range of products can be quite extreme, from the mutual funds or ETFs and things like that, to private funds that may be focused just on renewable power or other areas. As more and more millennials become empowered, we expect that this trend will certainly accelerate. Another big and important hurdle is data. A picture of improvement, however, more room to go. If you look back 2011, in the S&P 500, 20% of the companies gave any sort of sustainable information, sustainability report. Today, 85%. So you're seeing growing uptick in this, but still room for improvement. So we've been asked what more can be done. Let me give 4 different ideas. One is to create more incentives for the asset owners. You heard Mayor de Blasio. New York City is taking actions. They are an asset owner. We need regulations to line up with the goals. If the capital requirements, if the tax incentives, if the rating agencies, if all these things are in place in a way that discourages sustainability, we can't get asset owners to change their asset allocation. So that is a fundamental piece. Second is encouraging the disclosure of material information by companies. This might differ from industry to industry. It might even be different from company to company. Somehow rationalizing the landscape of what is this alphabet soup of multiple surveys, multiple entities, is a critical component, and one that only I think the public sector can solve right now. Third is the development of the products. I call this having an easy pass. So there's a very long road to get a product from inception to the market. Perhaps there can be a speed pass or an easy pass lane for products that have a sustainability component. Right now in the EU, there's a project underway on taxonomy. Once we can agree on a common language, perhaps we can use that roadmap to agree on how to get products available sooner. And then fourthly is recognizing the importance of corporate governance and stewardship standards. I noted earlier many different codes around the world. We think this dialogue is critical, and yet this very engagement is being questioned nowadays by competition authorities who have a totally different view of the world than the people in this room. So when we look back, we realize how far we've come. Literally billions of dollars of assets today invested in sustainable strategies. That's a real positive. Hundreds of companies providing more insights into their business. But we are at this important crossroads where the public sector, working closely with the private sector, can help in redefining the incentives, encouraging the behavior we want for the outcomes that we want, and helping us all get there quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. It's very concrete, Prime Minister, the list we just got from Barbara and BlackRock. So in your view, as a leader of your country, what are the things that needs to be done to really stimulate the establishment of a market for sustainability? Denmark has seen a lot of growth in some of the renewables, but to think this holistically, what's your recipe?
Well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me. And first of all, I think we definitely need a holistic approach. I share the opinion that we are moving in the right direction. I had the honor to chair the UN summit 3 years ago where we adopted the SDGs. And we are moving in the right direction, but we need to move faster. Just to follow up on Mayor de Blasio, who quoted a great mind, I would like to quote Elvis Presley. A little less conversation, a little more action. I think that's what's needed. And I think we need to realize that we need to invest in system change, in food system, transportation, energy, water, and the like. And if we want to make a real impact towards a greener and more sustainable world economy, we need to change these systems. So we need systematically changes. And we need to realize that this cannot be done by any sector alone. In fact, as I see it, the partnership concept that is Sustainable Development Goal number 17 is actually the key to all this if we want to unlock the potential in the rest of the 16 goals. And I think Denmark is a living example of doing just that. If you look into our society model, we have managed to decouple emission and economic growth by this kind of consensus democracy we have in the Scandinavian countries, where we have established partnerships between civil society, academia, business, and politicians. And we have been pushing changes by regulatory framework, and our business model, our businesses have responded to that. And for that reason, we now have, skills which could be used in other countries. And I think that gives us the obligation to lead to some extent. And that's why we have most recently, and I announced that at the UNGA last year, we have established a new global partnership called Partnering for Green Growth and the Global Goals 2030, or simply P4G. It consists of, right now, 8 countries, the C40s, among them New York, the network of the megacities around the world, leading businesses around the world, Unilever as an example. And the idea is to facilitate market-driven public-private partnerships within key economic areas. By matching the public and private sectors in partnerships, I think we can break down barriers for innovative solutions and sustainable growth, barriers that neither sector can overcome alone. And just to be a little bit more concrete, I would like to share with you, and I will be brief, just 2 examples. First, transportation. Transportation is the fastest growing source of greenhouse gas emission and accounts for 23% of CO2 emissions. And transitioning to low emission vehicles alone could make a huge impact, not only reducing emissions, but particle pollution as well. So replacing diesel buses with electric buses is exactly what one of the P4G projects sets out to do. And the goal is to introduce a future-proof, low-emission, economically profitable electric bus system in megacities such as Mexico City and Sao Paulo. And this could be an important step for the transition to green economy. Another example is the worldwide growth of e-commerce, which has created a need to reduce and recycle more of the materials used to pack and transport products. In China, home to the world's largest e-commerce company by volume, Alibaba, new approaches to package delivery, collection of materials and recycling show promising results. And these results can be scaled to other cities worldwide. So through this new P4G partnership, we try to, bring partners together, and we support them economically We have established a fund, and we have had a worldwide tender for concrete partnerships projects, and we are pleased to announce some of them at the very first P4G summit next month in Copenhagen. So I think there's no quick fixes, but we have to bring the progressive partners together in a very organized way, and I think being a Scandinavian countries who have showed or proved by example that this is doable, it gives us a special responsibility to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. David McLennan, you listen now to Barbara and what the Prime Minister also had to say on what they think it will take to stimulate the establishment of a sustainable market. We're looking forward to hearing your view.
Well, I heard the mayor quote Frank Sinatra, and then you said a little less talk, a little more action, which is Elvis Presley. So I'm trying to think of another popular artist that I could quote, but I don't have the answer right now. But good morning, and thank you for having me here on the panel. It's an honor to be here and to talk about a topic that's very important, and I'll pick up on two things, or a couple things. One is I don't get Larry's letter, so we're private, so we don't have it. But I agree, and I read it, and I agree with it, and having a business or being very explicit in your business about what is your purpose and how does it make the world a better place, I think is a very important component of creating a sustainable system, for agriculture. Specifically, we changed our statement of purpose about 3 years ago to state that our purpose at Cargill is to nourish the world in a safe, responsible, and sustainable way. So it's not just about getting food to where it's needed, and we wanted to call out specifically how are we going to do it, focusing on the safety of the food system, the safety of the people that are involved in supply chains, do it in a responsible way, responsible to the environment, to the communities, but in a sustainable way. So we have called that out as our purpose in this world in our company. So I think that's one way to do it, is to change the culture and the way you think. Which leads me to my second point, which is what the mayor said, is you've got to change your business model. You can't just say we're going to do it the same old way and look where we are relative to climate change. And so what's that old cliche about the definition of insanity? Keep on doing things the same way and expecting different results. We have to change our business model. And the mayor talked about fossil fuels. For example, we have a growing business in bioindustrial products, which are ingredients, whether it be in cosmetics or binder for asphalt or binder for insulation in homes, which is made from agricultural products rather than petrochemicals. So that is one thing we are doing. But I would focus on three things. One is the importance, three things in terms of creating a sustainable system. One is the importance of open trade, and everybody knows what's going on. Open trade and getting products to where they're needed, food products from places of surplus like North America and South America to places of deficit like Eastern Europe or Southeast Asia, and trade's under attack. And it won't surprise you that we think that's a mistake, especially as it relates to agriculture and food. There is enough food in the world to help reduce hunger, maybe not eliminate it, but it's got to get to where it's needed, and we've got to have open borders to do it. Secondly, private sector investment in infrastructure. You look at a country like Brazil, for example, which is a huge agriculture producing nation, but they're still developing their infrastructure like ports, railroads, highways. There's significant bottlenecks in the highway system in Brazil, which make it difficult to get food out of the fields to the rivers and ports to be able to be exported. And now Brazil is a huge producer, obviously, or huge, I should say, exporter of soybeans to China, now that the Chinese have stopped importing U.S. soybeans. And then finally, I would say trade and technology. I'm sorry, training and technology, not trade and technology. Farmer training, giving them the tools, whether it just be basic knowledge, particularly in developing countries, about modern farming techniques that have evolved over decades in more well-to-do countries, again, North and South America, to help them increase their yields, to help them to go beyond just being subsistence farmers, and to give them the tools, not only the agricultural tools, but the life tools. So, for example, and Prime Minister, you mentioned about SDG 17 and partnerships. We've had over a 50-year partnership with CARE, and we recognize we can't do this by ourselves. We're an agriculture, food, and nutrition company. We have to have partners like CARE or World Wildlife or TNC or others to help us work with farmers in their communities. And in West Africa, we developed a program called the Cargill Cocoa Promise, which pays farmers a premium for their cocoa products if they raise it, if they grow cocoa and produce it in a sustainable way. So it's a very clear checklist of here's what you need to do, and it's everything from responsible use of water and pesticides to responsible use of tools to create worker safety. And with that premium, and I visited one of the co-ops in Cote d'Ivoire recently, they have taken that money and developed an infrastructure for their towns and villages, like a bank, like a school, like a medical system. So it's not just about the skills to produce the food, but it's also the infrastructure, a modern banking system, or to have a medical system to take care of their people. I think that's part of creating a sustainable agricultural system, is to put the money back into the communities and give them and train them with the skills for agriculture and their own life and their own villages and their own well-being. So that's what I think is necessary to do, and what companies like ours can do to create a sustainable agriculture system, and that's the kind of things that we are doing. Thank you.
Just a short follow-up before we go to Winnie. You are the largest privately held company in the U.S. Does that give you more flexibility when it comes to issues related to also caring about establishing a sustainable market? And also, I saw a BCG report that came out the other day showing that non-financial performance on certain environment and sustainable development topics had statistically significant impact on companies' valuations and on margins. Is this a discussion you have in your board too?
It is, and I think we have the benefit of being privately owned, and so as much as I miss not getting Larry's letter, I don't miss
I'll
having
send it to you.
Yeah, I've got it. I get a copy of it every year. Somehow it makes it to me, but I don't have to go to every quarter and talk to the analysts about why did we miss earnings, why did we make earnings, you know, what are our margins in certain businesses. It's a real privilege to be private, but most importantly because we can take a longer-term view. And our family owners put 80% of the profits back into the company for investment in our employees and our business in the communities. We give 2% of our trailing 2 years' profits to philanthropies around the world in our communities. So it is a real benefit to have that patience. And we had a board meeting 2 weeks ago in which one of our family directors said, we will put people over profits. And we can do that as a private company. I don't think you can do that as a public company, or if you do, you're going to get a lot of criticism from your analysts and from your large institutional shareholders.
Winnie?
Thank you. And it's a pleasure, it's an honor to be on this panel and in this summit that the World Economic Forum organizes around the General Assembly. I think it's a great opportunity. I just want to start from a point that Barbara made. She said, talking about a glass being half full or half empty. I want to talk about the half empty part and the interesting ways that we could fill the half empty part. Because it's a decade since the financial crisis. And we are just now, just a few blocks from its epicenter. But what has been happening? Over the last decade, billionaires' fortunes have increased 6 times faster than average wages. Last year, 8 out of $10 of new wealth created went to the top 1%. The bottom 50% got zero of the wealth that was created in the world. So we're in a world where there's a few at the top who are having it good, and there's a huge majority there who are quite angry about the way things are going. So we might say we are in the right direction, but for many people, they don't feel that the boat includes them. And this crisis, which is really a crisis of economic inequality, has a human face. Let me tell you two stories. Here in the United States, Oxfam works with poultry workers. A woman like Dolores works hard in a poultry factory, slicing the chickens, but she and her co-workers have to wear diapers to work because they are not allowed a toilet break. That's how bad it is. I can talk about Budi, an Indonesian woman working. She has to shell 950 shrimps per hour, stands for 9 hours to get that minimum wage she gets. It's so sad that people who are working to produce the food that we eat go hungry themselves. Hunger has been increasing. The UN has released its report last week. For the third year running, the numbers of hungry people is increasing. We are back to where we were 10 years ago on the question of hunger. So, the market for many of these people is not fair and is not sustainable. I must say that I'm so frustrated that when we talk about the structural barriers in the market that disempower women, that disempower workers, that when we talk about structural barriers, others want to talk about the modest, the small things, the tweaks that you can do around the market. We need fundamental change. Fundamental change. And where should we start? We should start with the business model. I agree. Business models must change. You know, the chief economist of the central bank in the UK gave a piece of data that I've been quoting everywhere, that in 1970, companies in the United Kingdom were giving to shareholders 10% of their profits, 10%. Today, it's 70%. We have a type of shareholder capitalism that's extreme, and that's what must change. We must have business models that share value and power more equitably with the shareholders, with their workers, with their suppliers, and this is possible. These models are there. Oxfam has been involved in experimenting with alternative business models for the last 30, 40 years. We founded a company 20 years ago called Cafe Direct that shares its profits with its workers, that publishes its pay ratios. The top earner in the company doesn't earn more than 4.4 times the bottom earner. The company has 2 seats on its board for its workers, and so on and so on. So these models exist. We need governments to support them, to support the investors in these alternative models, so that they become the mainstream model, so that the extreme business model fades away. So that's what we need, to change the business models. Secondly, we need governments to act for their people, not to be in a close relationship with big business, to the extent that the billions that the big business people make, they use to lobby governments more and more. Let me give you a piece of data that's shocking, that our researchers found. Here in the United States, we found, and we were looking at just some subsectors sectors. We looked at the financial sector, we looked at the pharma industry. We found here in the US, 50 biggest companies spent over $350 million lobbying on tax issues, while receiving over $420 billion in tax breaks. I know you're mathematicians, some of you here. If you work out the figure, for every dollar spent on lobbying, these 50 companies collectively received $1,200 in tax breaks. Now, that's a return on investment. So, we need action, 3 areas of action from governments. 1, to rein in tax dodging and to tax progressively. We need that fiscal space to put in the investments that will then give quality health, quality education, reduce poverty. That's 1. 2, we need governments to regulate the economy. Regulation is key. We need to, the market cannot be, markets drive prosperity, but markets should not drive society. Regulation is important. The role of regulation is key here. So those 2, for me, are critical. Rein in tax dodging, regulation, and of course, not trashing the planet completely. The pendulum for climate action is now going to the south, to the developing countries. We need governments to make stronger commitments on their emission targets. We need businesses to divest from fossil fuels. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara, there has been a lot of reference to Larry Fink's, your CEO's letter. They're quite famous, but this year it really got the headlines because it was about companies' responsibility to also be responsible not only to shareholders, but to society, to the employees, but also those bigger causes that we have discussed today. Based on this letter, have you seen any change? Is the world changing? Are the companies taking more responsibility here?
So I would again be somewhat on the optimistic side, and I think David's story was a positive one and a great example. You know, the response to Larry's letter was sensational. That said, everyone read into it what they wanted to. We received hundreds of responses from CEOs, many of them laying out, as David did, their company, what they felt their purpose was, how they were going about becoming a better, call it corporate citizen, if you will. And I'm going to use BlackRock as an example because it's easy for us to tell other people, we think you should have a purpose, we think you should do these things, but what does it mean for us? And I think that will help put some perspective on it. And I've taken to calling ESG GS&E because I think it does start with governance. In the case of a private company, you have some flexibilities that a public company might not have, but governance being a really critical component. So when you look at BlackRock, what do we consider our purpose? We look at creating better financial outcomes for clients. That is the core of our purpose. How do we do it? How do we get there? Being a fiduciary, acting in a positive way, offering good products, etc. But when you look at the company itself, starting with governance, we've gone out and we've said we think diversity is important at the board level. Very important. Diversity of thought. If you're running a global business, do you have a global perspective in your boardroom? It's easy to measure. Do you have any women on your board? So when you look at BlackRock and you look at the percentages, whether it's international, it's by citizenship, it's by gender, we have a diverse board. And that's something we think is critical from a long-term business perspective. Second, look at the social side. whether it's employees. We do an employee opinion survey every year. We actually listen and we respond to what the employees say. We try and improve the environment for them. Changes in benefits, changes in environment, all different kinds of things. If it comes up in the survey, we try and address it. Likewise, participating in our communities. We have a whole program on impact. And it's not just about giving money, philanthropy, but making volunteer opportunities available to our employees and encouraging them to participate in their communities. And that's been extremely successful, I think, from our employees' standpoint, but also in the communities in which we live and work. And then lastly is E. E seems to be the focus of today, but it is only one component, and it is a broad component. Clean air, clean water. It's not just climate, it's many, many other things. So I'll give, again, 2 examples. We're not a manufacturing business. We're not an agricultural business. We're an asset management business. What things can we control? One is data centers. So we have built extremely energy efficient data centers. It turns out these are energy pigs. We've made more efficient designs. We've located them with hydropower, the ultimate renewable energy. We've also focused on things like forests. And one of the things that happens in the US is you have to deliver reams and reams of paper to your shareholders in your funds. We've lobbied very hard, so lobbying can be good, Winnie. We've lobbied very hard to change that default to be an opt-in versus an opt-out, where people will first get e-delivery, electronic delivery of their statements. Only if they request paper will they get paper. This will save millions of trees, in addition to the production of the paper, the delivery, the filling of landfills, all of it extremely wasteful. And this is an incredibly important energy issue, an environmental issue that we think we can have some impact on. So again, simple examples, we can give you many more, but in the interest of time, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you for also mentioning this, the interest of the time. We are really getting close to the end, but I wanted just to follow up shortly, David, on something Barbara here said, is on the change in the thinking among the companies and the CEOs. You have had a long career in business, also know many years as head of one of the largest companies in the United States. Have you seen a genuine change in the approach to this sustainability and when it comes to these issues among CEOs and leaders? Or is it partly window dressing? That's one question. The other one is, what do you expect also from the regulators? Is there really a change from that side that is needed, and is that happening?
I think to your first question, yes, I don't think it's window dressing, and I think it depends on the company, but I think more and more CEOs are talking about sustainability issues around social responsibility and environmental responsibility, some more than others, but I do believe, and it's driven by this type of dialogue, it's driven by consumers, and I would also say, as I think about our own company, generationally, I mean, millennials, it's not a question. And I would say that we find that people are coming to work for Cargill because of what we're doing in sustainability, or because of our purpose, our statement of purpose. And when I think about when I came out of college, that just was not even on the table back in the 80s, 1980s, not 1880s. But if you think about the last 4 decades, generationally, it's far more important. I think about, what was your second question?
What do you expect from the regulators?
Thank you.
Is that happening?
Thank you. So regulators, expect them to be...
Having one close to you there.
And I'll keep it brief, but I think recognizing that markets need to work, that it's not in regulation, but it's politicians, I think, sending false signals about price and the mobility of food with improper or short-term policies is not a good idea. But I think the regulators, we can't, again, I mentioned it before, we can't do it by ourselves. We have to have partnerships with other organizations and the regulators to give us the support and the air cover, if you will, to change our business model.
Thank you. Prime Minister, sake of time, 1 minute. What do you see any real change from the business side? Are you satisfied with the proactiveness on the business side?
Well, I think you should never be satisfied, but things again are moving in the right direction. And when I look in the Danish business community, and that goes more broadly in Europe, generally speaking, I agree with what you just said. It's not just window dressing. It's responding to facts. I mean, the reality, the global warming, but also to values among our youngsters. I totally agree with you. I mean, when I talk to my own kids, and they are in the 20s, it's not only about money, it's about a purpose in life. So I think things are moving in the right direction. But then again, we shouldn't be too naive. And I mean, business is business, so you can't just leave it to the business community. And for that reason, you need regulators to framing this change. I agree with what you said about the need for free trade. I mean, if we should solve these problems, we need the world to work together, and we should avoid building barriers and walls, but building bridges instead. And I'm proud to say, when I talk to the Danes, or when I look into the figures, the Danes are very, very open-minded, and they are in favor of globalization. And just to build a bridge to you, I think the main reason for that is that we have managed, not only in Denmark, but in Northern Europe, in the Scandinavian societies, to redistribute what we had gained from globalizations. So I think, I mean, if we should really achieve all this, it's not only about working together in international communities, there's also some homework to be done. And I will not interfere in internal politics in US, but I think the key is free trade, more international cooperation, and to unlock this door, we need the citizens to support this, and in order to do so, we should take care on a domestic level to redistribute the wealth among our citizens, so they will be in favor of all this.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Famous last words, Winnie, but they have to be 30 seconds.
Is this fair? Change is happening, but change isn't happening fast enough. We need to accelerate. Poor countries are showing leadership on the question of climate change. We have more investments, higher and faster growing investments in renewable energies in China and India. South Africa is one of the top 10 countries that are deploying utility-scale solar power. So we're seeing positive leadership, especially in the developing countries. We need to see more from the richer countries. For business, I think the change is too little, too slow. Their supply chains are treating people and the environment really like trash. People are not, the minimum wage, the living wage is not achieved, the working conditions, the gender wage gap, women still, I think the World Economic Forum has told us it's not going to be achieved in the next 150 years unless something changes, just to pay men and women equally. So there's still a lot to do in social justice, environmental justice by business.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Winnie. Thank you to the panel. One should end when one still wants to continue. That's a good rule. I have several other questions that I would like to ask, but we should all remain seated, because we will now have a chance to really meet those that are walking the talk, that are making change on the ground. We will have the Social Entrepreneur of the Year Award ceremony. It will happen after a short video. Then I welcome Hilde Schwab, chairperson and co-founder of the Schwab Foundation for Social Entrepreneurship. Hilde will then come to the stage and lead us through the award ceremony. But first, the video.
Today, we are lacking social inclusion. We cannot rely on governments alone to provide social infrastructure and safety nets. We must mobilize individuals who, in entrepreneurial and innovative ways, tackle the big problems we are faced with now and in the future. The Schwab Foundation gives the social entrepreneurs a network to exchange expertise and experiences. It gives them a global presence and visibility. Social entrepreneurs show all the other leaders who are part of the forum that social responsibility is more important than just making money.
Having access to the World Economic Forum for any social entrepreneur gives us a greater chance to scale our impact.
Thousands of initiatives on a local level that improve the lives of millions of people.
Let's welcome Hilde Schwab.
So, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, this year marks the 20th anniversary of the Schwab Foundation. I clearly remember back in 1998 that social entrepreneurship was a new concept to us, combining market discipline and business practices with a social mission and deep commitment to those less fortunate. This idea captured our imagination, and so Klaus and I decided to create and fund the Schwab Foundation for Social Entrepreneurship in order to find and give a platform to social entrepreneurs at World Economic Forum events. 350 social entrepreneurs were honored over the last 20 years, and most importantly, those Schwab Fellows formed their own community of experience exchange and strong professional and personal relations. They are a global family. They are united by their passion, creativity, persistence, and optimism that a more just and equitable world is possible. We just concluded a two-day Social Entrepreneur Summit with 150 of our community members and the 2018 awardees that will be honored today. Many of them will participate in the program of this Sustainable Impact Development Summit until tomorrow evening and contribute their expertise and experience. I would like to associate Dr. Precious Moloi-Motsepe with us with this ceremony, applauding her steadfast leadership and support of this special community. It is now my great pleasure to introduce to you the 2018 Social Entrepreneurs of the Year, and I invite each awardee to join me on stage when I call their name. Brukti Tigabo. WizKids provides early childhood education to